Welcome to the Darkstream. Voxday, voxday.blogspot.com, and unauthorized TV. So I've got a slight stream or a slight delay on, and I am hoping that this is going to take care of some of the issues that we've had with drop frames. I'm experimenting with XSplit's advanced CBR feature, so we'll see how that works. But tonight we're talking about piling up the SJW skulls. And you know, it's been difficult over the past 2 years because we look at the way that the SJWs have been attacking all of us. We look at the way that they have been making it difficult for us to deal with the situation and so forth. And so I'm listening for something. Okay. Anyhow, I'm also having some problems turning off this cover here. I don't know why. I'm going to try something. There we go. A little bit of maneuver, I guess, takes care of it to a certain extent. Although we're still seeing this. I wonder why that won't come off. All right. Well, I'm just gonna remove it. There we go. So anyhow, it's been a difficult slog for a lot of us. You know, it's very tiresome to get deplatformed. It's very tiresome to get demonetized. And it's demoralizing for a lot of people. And of course, that's why they do it. That's the whole purpose. That's the whole point, is to demoralize you. But here's the key thing to understand about SJWs. They don't expect resistance. They don't expect counterattacks. They don't expect you to do anything except complain a little bit to an unsympathetic media and then go away. In fact, that's what they're counting on. It's very revelatory to get insight into how SJWs actually think. And, you know, I pointed this out back in 2015, which is that when you strike back at them, you very, very quickly realize that there is no defense. They have no defenses. They're not ready for it. They haven't prepared for it. So a lot of people, after Indiegogo deplatformed us, they said, well, what do we do? What can we do? Well, as you know, we immediately left Indiegogo less than a month after we were deplatformed. Do you think it's an accident that the CEO of Indiegogo was replaced last month? Do you think it's an accident that Neon Revolt just successfully completed a crowdfunding campaign for Revolution Q, the very topic that was the cause of Alt Hero Q's banning or deplatforming? These things are not coincidences. These things are the result of not only standing your ground, but going on the offensive. I very, very strongly doubt that any of those things would have happened if we hadn't taken very strong measures to come back hard against the SJW attack on us. Now you can't always win. You know, that's normal. And so you're going to hear some dogs going off here. So. And they don't necessarily have to be, then you have a pretty good idea that that is the opposition that the mainstream wants. You know, to give you a very different example, look at the way that people respond. Someone like Glenn Beck responds when Owen Benjamin is mentioned. Nothing. He just freezes and tries to change the subject as quickly as possible. That's how you know people are approved opposition. You know, the things that they do are covered in a way that is not designed to try to stop them. Someone like Roosh is genuine opposition. Whenever he does anything, they pull out all the stops to try to interfere with him. Richard Spencer, Tommy Robinson, etc. Those kind of guys who are David Duke, those type of guys who are always in the news for one reason or another. It's not because their meetings are just too big. I mean, why would anyone care about Roosh getting together with 30 guys? Because his ideas are considered genuinely dangerous. Yeah, Brian, you're wrong. I mean, yes, I do know that Tommy was put in jail, and I do know that he gets attacked from time to time, but he's also, doing things like disinviting people and playing a bit of a gatekeeping role. Anytime you see somebody playing a gatekeeping role, then you have a pretty good idea that they're at the very least approved opposition. Legionnaire Bear says, can Castalia publish Neon Revolt's book? Of course we can. He hasn't asked us to. So, I mean, obviously we don't have any problem. I support what Neon Revolt is doing. Absolutely. I'll look forward to reading it. I may even do a review of it for unauthorized. But we don't make a habit of running around contacting people saying, hey, we know you know who you are, but why talk to us? People will, if people want to work with us, they know where to find us. Why game out the Sino-Russian war versus US without talking about nukes? Because we're talking about wars that can be won. There's no point in talking about nukes, because once nukes get involved, the whole thing becomes completely unpredictable. And I don't believe that nukes are going to be used, because nukes have never been used against any other nuclear armed party. So I don't think that they are relevant to the equation. Let's see. But anyhow, my point is that a lot of us are far too concerned and far too worried about what the SJWs can do to us, rather than thinking on a regular basis what we can do to them. Because I guarantee you, they are collectively afraid of all of us. They're terrified. And so, a little bit of resistance goes an awfully long way. And if you look at the people that keep getting deplatformed repeatedly, one thing you'll notice is that they never fight. They never resist. They just whine about it and then wait until the next deplatforming. Bilo's Barnyard asks, I'm kind of curious about Milo's recent video with Jordan B. Peterson. Wasn't he on to Peterson's BS even before your alarm tripped? I think so. I think he was paying attention to him before I was. We both recognized it immediately. I think he recognized the sinister aspect of Peterson before I did. As to why does Milo engage with people like Peterson, is because Milo is fearless when it comes to direct confrontation. He likes to go into the belly of the beast. I mean, they fear him in a way that is almost unparalleled. I was watching something on Sky News the other day, and it was just a media wrap-up that they do, usually with one relatively left media member and then one nominally right media personality. And they asked them questions about the issues of the day. And what was really fascinating was that this woman who was there to represent the left brought up Donald Trump and Milo Yiannopoulos in these tones of just fear and awe. And it's because Milo is astonishingly quick on his feet, and he's really, really facile. He can go in to a room full of 30 feminists with an entire panel stacked against him and come out on top. Now that led to an amount of overconfidence, which is part of why he got hit so hard when they went after him, when the whole media went after him after the Bill Maher stuff. But he is I would say an unparalleled talent in that regard. So let's see. Can I purchase the early version of A Sea of Skulls only through Amazon? No. You can go to archavencomics.com and pick it up there. Let's see. SJWs have the support of all the system, the media, the corporations, the institutions. What do they have to fear from us who have nothing? Everything. We can take their companies away from them. You must have missed the beginning. They came after Archaven last year. What's happened recently? Their head of trust and safety left. Their CEO has been replaced. They've had layoffs. And we published the first alt hero Q #1. They didn't even slow us down. And they are tottering on the edge of a existential crisis. I mean, I can't say more right now, but I can tell you that we hold their fate in our hands. If I do maybe 2 interviews, it ceases to exist. And so, there's what they are doing is fundamentally and intrinsically wrong. And they are doing it in such a way that leaves them very, very exposed. Now, certain of those companies, Facebook, Google, they're big enough to take extremely serious blows. Google is now facing another $28 billion in possible fines I think in Ireland. What these companies are doing is fundamentally wrong. They're not paying anywhere near the taxes that they should be paying. And so their existence is dependent upon the goodwill of the public. And we are the vanguard of the public that is not happy with them. Because what they're doing is incredibly destructive. It's much more destructive than anyone realizes. If the political leaders and especially the economic leaders understood what these social media companies are doing to the online economy, they're turning the online economy into a Latin American style economy where nobody can trust anybody, no contracts are any good, and nobody can anticipate reaping the benefits of their own efforts. And so they're turning the online economy into a third world economy, which will prevent its growth, which will cause it to contract, and will cause an awful lot of people to lose money, to lose opportunity, and so forth. Furthermore, it's opening the door for national jurisdictions that are beyond SJW influence, whether it's Russia, whether it's Iran, whether it's China. It's opening the door for them to come in and absolutely clean them out. So they have a lot to fear from us. Just because they're powerful today doesn't mean they're even going to be around tomorrow. And we have the ability to stand up against them. We have the ability to stop them. It may not seem like it, but I promise you it's true. Let me get to a few super chats here. Okay, this was from the beginning here. Let's see. Legionnaire Bear says, love A Throne of Bones. Why can't I buy hardcover at Castalia? Want to support as much as possible. By the way, I like your straightforward writing style. You can buy the hardcover from our Castalia Direct store. There's a link below the videos. It says Castalia Direct. If you go there, you can buy A Throne of Bones in hardcover, or you can buy it in paperback. Let's see. Anthony Scardy Cat keeps posting about somebody named Mersh. Oh, it's one of those cis guys. Legionnaire Bear says, recovering Peterson fan. Listen to your work on evolution. I've been unable to tie primitive lobster brain structure to any human brain structure. Have you investigated this? No, I don't pay that much attention to that sort of, evolutionary physiology. Mostly because I am sufficiently content that evolution, as we generally understand it to be, and as we are generally taught that it is intrinsically incorrect. So, once I determine that something is not to be relied upon, I seldom bother to delve much deeper into it. Submitted to Christ says, currently listening to Corrosion, great book. Recommendation on other AI self-aware books. And when is the next book of Corrosion? We're not really working on another book right now. That was kind of a one-off. I'm not saying there won't be anymore, but that was a book that came about due to some unusual circumstances. The whole thing is basically one big inside joke. The fact that the book is actually pretty good is, I guess, what you might say the punchline of the joke. So, but I'm glad you like it. I mean, I actually I'm quite pleased with it as a book. Statics says, why aren't the far left in same positions like Medicare for illegal immigrants hurting the Democrats? Or are they? Well, we don't know yet. We'll have to see if what I've been predicting for a long time, which is that the Democrats will be the diversity party and the Republicans will be the white party, comes to pass. It is coming to pass, but the question is at what speed? These sorts of policies should drive even more whites to the Republican Party, but, you know, we don't know how fast. And also, there's a lot of groups of white identities, like homosexuals, feminists, etc., who are going to cling to their diversity alliances much longer than anybody would consider to be rational. I mean, gays do care about their pocketbooks. Do they care enough to balance their hatred for their rejection by those who hold to traditional morality? It's hard to say. But I think it is hurting the Democrats. We just don't know to what extent. Donald Trump has been a great president, but he hasn't really delivered, in a sense that the public accepts, on his two primary promises to drain the swamp and build the wall. And so you would think that that would hurt him a lot. And even though he has kept us out of any new wars, all of his flirtations and the way that he's surrounded by neoclowns in his administration makes an awful lot of his supporters very nervous and less enthusiastic than they should be. So you would think that Trump should be in trouble, but he's not, because a lot of people who voted for Hillary are now moving over to Trump because there's no way they're going to support the lunatics that the Democrats are going to serve up this time, in my opinion. Yeah, it's kind of funny. It seems like some folks who are not familiar with me seem to think that I'm going to juggle or engage in some sort of emotional pyrotechnics or, engage in long and amusing rants like Owen. But, that's not what I do. And if this isn't for you, that's okay. We're just calmly, rationally discussing a lot of these different ideas. That's all. C-Speak says, if Trump loses in 2020, is your balkanization estimate of 2033 reduced? The hands up for Medicare for illegals was absolute lunacy. No, it's just a rough estimate. I'm not sitting there paying close attention to it and seeing, okay, well, this is going to speed it up and this is going to slow it down. Certain things happen that you think, wow, maybe I was too optimistic. And then other things happen. You're like, oh no, that's, I think that maybe I'm being pessimistic. So I don't get into that game. I worked out the larger trend a long, long time ago. And it's interesting to see how events do seem to be generally moving in that direction. But, there's some days it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Some day it's 1 step forward. They actually managed to exceed even my very, very low expectations. Defiance Bear says, the fact that we haven't killed each other seems surprising to me. We rebelled starting with a T-tax. Are we more submissive than past populations? Oh, absolutely. The founding fathers would have revolted back around like 1914. I think you need to keep in mind that the Civil War demonstrated very clearly that people would not be allowed to leave, that it was no longer a voluntary union, but it was a empire imposed by force. Everybody knows it, even though they don't want to admit it. You know, you cross certain lines and people will start warning you that bad things might happen to you because of the government or because of other, influential forces and so forth. Everybody's living to some extent in a state of, if not fear, at least wariness, and has been for some time. That's not the way that the founding fathers lived. They didn't believe that Parliament had any right to do what it was doing. We don't have the same level of principles. We don't have the same strength of tradition. And so that's why we submit and accept behavior that is far, far, far more egregious than that which they fought a revolution over. I was just reading the history of England, and it was very interesting to read about the Revolutionary War from the English perspective. They thought the colonists were crazy. They couldn't figure out what they were objecting to because the tax was so minimal and so minor. And there was actually, it wasn't just a tax on stamps and tea. There was also one other staple that they actually removed entirely. You don't hear about that on the American side because the English actually got rid of it on request. And so, the idea that they shouldn't be taxed at all because it wasn't possible for them to sit in Parliament made no sense to the British politicians. Let's see. But things are heating up, but right now people are still too generally fat and happy. The young men who have been deprived of women and wives are kept amused with video games and porn in a way that they're just not, that they weren't in the past, and they're not in other cultures. And so, the offenses to Christian morality and to tradition are overlooked because Christianity and its organizations have been so badly cucked. I mean, if you look at the people that are at the head of the Southern Baptist Church, I mean, they're terrible. They have no spines whatsoever. They're pure churchians. They love to wallow in SJW talk. They're not leading the resistance. They're not resisting at all. So, the times have been too good. We've had it too easy. But, like the meme says, out of easy times comes easy men, which produces the hard times that then creates the hard men. It's important for us to understand that and be ready for that. Do you think Texas and California will be the first to break off from America? No, I think it's going to be more like New Mexico and Southern California. Texas is pretty big. Scarlet Phoenix says, Vox is my new favorite stream. Well, thank you, Scarlet. Bradford Walker is correct. Tulsi is not going to get the nomination. The Democratic establishment hates her. The media hates her. And the neoclowns hate her. she's way too anti-war for them. So I don't think she has any chance at it. If the U.S. is balkanized, where would be the best place to live in North America? It totally depends on who you are. Whoever you are best off being in a strong community of people who look like you, more or less, think like you, more or less, and believe more or less the same things you do. Homogeneous nations come out of heterogeneous empires. So, you want to be around the kind of people that can stand to have you around. No, I have not read Bronze Age Mindset. The Rational Rise says, I find your term churchian useful, but I'd be interested in a clear definition. Can you provide the most important distinctions for us non-cucked Christians to have up our sleeves? Well, I can try. A churchian is someone who puts the organization of the church ahead of the Bible, ahead of Jesus Christ, and ahead of the traditions of Christianity. So, for example, if they're talking about racism, they're a churchian. Racism is never mentioned in the Bible. It's never been a concern of any of the church fathers, Augustine, Aquinas, Tertullian, Billy Graham. Well, maybe Billy Graham wrote about it, but it's something that was never brought up in centuries and centuries of Christian theological debate. So the fact that a church gets concerned about that, or inclusivity, or equality, or any of the aspects of the modern political agenda, strongly indicate that a nominally Christian organization is in fact a churchian one. Another important one is if they avoid the use of the term Jesus Christ. Another important one is if they are inclusive of homosexuality. Another important one is if they endorse female pastors or female leadership. All of those things are strong indicators that the organization has been converged to some extent and is in the process of becoming churchian rather than Christian. Jerome points out churchians also fly the gay flag. Exactly. Unfiltered Politics put it more succinctly than I did. Churchians are more concerned with this world than with the Word of God. Yeah, you could say that they are of the world as well as being in it. Sam Sutherland says, making apple wine this week. Good for you. That sounds good. JKM does a little virtue signaling. Rather have people that think like me than look like me. Well, what you'll find is that those two things actually tend to coincide and run in parallel more often than not. If the states begin to split, do you think they'll have a new constitution? Eventually, perhaps. Will the remaining states return to the Constitution? No, of course not. The Constitution is dead. I mean, think about what a Constitution actually means. A Constitution is not intrinsically a document. A Constitution is something that expresses what the entity is. When you talk about your Constitution, it's about the elements that constitute you. And so the nations, plural, that exist today have are constituted of very, very different elements than the United States of America circa 1789. So there can be no returning to the Constitution, not without an almost insanely unthinkable amount of re-education, mass deportation and DNA testing. I mean, it's just not really possible. I once heard someone theorize that Christianity is the original communism. That's utterly stupid and indicates a total unfamiliarity with what communism is. Who's the vanguard of the proletariat in Christianity? I mean, it's not even wrong. It's a category error. Communism is a political ideology of this world. Christianity is a religion that is not of this world. It's like trying to discuss the colors of mathematics. You know, I mean, to me that sounds like saying, someone told me that addition is purple. What do you have to say to that? You know, all I can say is you're crazy. You know, there's no answer for that. Cave Bear said, a good Baptist goes to church every Sunday. A committed Baptist goes Sunday evenings too. Those who really love the Lord go on Wednesday. I think that can be a form of churchianity, but I don't think that it is really there's plenty of good Christians genuine Christians who do that as well. And who believe that the more often that you go to church, the better. It's fairly natural. I mean, especially for someone like me, I write polemics. I embrace, at least some level of debate and discourse. I've certainly engaged in a number of significant and intensive debates on my blog. So I think it's fairly natural for people to forget that there's 800 people watching and that their comment is just one of literally dozens, and that I'm not going to get into a debate. I'm not here to debate. I'm happy to answer a question, but if you disagree with my answer, that doesn't mean that we're going to spend the next 15 minutes discussing it. In the same way, people email me and they'll say, I have a question. What about this? And I'll give them an answer. It's really kind of annoying sometimes, because you find yourself regretting sending the first email because they're like, well, okay, but then if that's true, then this. It's like, I'm not Ann Landers or whoever the agony aunt du jour is. I'm happy to answer a question from time to time. I'm committed to answering, especially the super chats, but that's not an open invitation to a debate. And some people just seem to think that it is. I'm not saying that debates are bad, but, when I'm doing a stream at 2 a.m. my time, that's not when I want to have a big argument for half an hour. What do you estimate is the average IQ of your audience? I think that it's always much lower than you think, because even with a fairly large, like 100 people, what's necessary to bump the average up significantly is very unlikely. But I would guess that my average audience is probably around 107, if I had to guess. Nemo Togoff says, Vox, how do you reconcile your not doing internet drama with your engagement of internet drama with Shapiro and Peterson? I'm not engaged in internet drama with either of them. Internet drama is when you're when you have a personal relationship with people and you're taking shots at each other and that sort of thing. That's not the case with Shapiro or Peterson. In the case of Shapiro or Peterson, they're just public figures who are putting out ideas that I'm shooting down. You know, there's no drama in either case. I don't have a relationship with Jordan Peterson. I don't have a relationship with Ben Shapiro. You know, they happen to be two of the more significant public figures of a political interest group that I oppose intensely. You know, I have no room for compromise with either Jordan Peterson or Ben Shapiro, but they are sufficiently significant figures at this point in time that I spend a certain amount of time criticizing them and their ideas, just as back in 2008 I was criticizing the New Atheists. You know, Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins, Daniel Dennett, you know, Christopher Hitchens, Michel Onfray. I had nothing personally against any of them. You know, I got along fine in my email exchanges with Christopher Hitchens and Sam Harris. So there's no drama there either. But there was a lot of intense criticism. M. Sifa says, does engaging in sin make it more difficult to have a sense of the spiritual or believe in God? Yes. The more you sin, the more you give in to sin, the more difficult it is for you to connect with God. God is holy. You know, God can have no contact with sin. That's why Jesus' sacrifice for us will say about forgiveness. You know, you're supposed to forgive your brother 70 times 7, at least 490 times. If we're capable of that, think about how much more forgiveness he's capable of. The key is just you fail, you repent, you try to do better. You know, again and again and again and again if necessary. And, you know, over time, many times, you will find that it's easier not to lie, not to cheat people, not to spend your evening surfing porn, whatever your temptation might be. You know, the more you give into it, the harder it is to resist. The more you resist, the easier it is to resist. It's kind of ironic that way. I wrote a blog post about the SSH addressing the blurred lines of pattern behaviors. I suspect the blurred lines are due to men in transition from one category to the next. I tend to disagree. I think that people have different strains that run through them, and also it's all fractal. You know, hierarchies are all fractal and depend on the situation that you're in. Now, you're always going to have a dominant pattern of behavior, but you know, even the most annoying little gamma is going to come off with a couple alpha patterns if he's put in the right situation with, you know, a bunch of omegas. And so, you know, I think it's a mistake to try to focus too much on, you know, trying to categorize and catalog and apply. You know, it's kind of funny. I mean, that's actually a very gamma activity, is to try to convert the whole thing into some sort of system that you can completely understand. It's human behavior. We're not going to understand it. But that doesn't mean that we can't recognize enough useful patterns to be able to better understand the situation. Brian York, if I wore a tiny shoe that only covered my big toe, would you trust me by optics alone? No. Then why trust anybody who wears a tiny little hat on the top of their head? I wouldn't say that's the most convincing logic that I've ever run across, but there is a ring of amusing truth to that. Fractal, can you give me some context and meaning on how you're using it? Well, yeah, you understand that a fractal pattern is something that replicates at different orders of magnitude. So what we're talking about is how in the social hierarchy, the same way at the high school level, you have a social hierarchy. If you go up to the next level of, say, a university or a corporation, you're going to have a larger hierarchy, but it's going to take the same shape as the hierarchy at the lower level. You're always going to have your people on top. You're always going to have your losers on the bottom. You're always going to have your responsible performers in the middle, and you're always going to have your disgruntled people sniping away and disrupting the hierarchy. You're always going to have those things, no matter how big the organization, no matter what the organization is, no matter what the hierarchy is. Megan says, I believe that once you accept Christ, it is more difficult to enjoy sinful behavior. I wish that were true. I think it is true for some people. On the other hand, I tend to fall more in the school of the pastor, it may have been Billy Graham, who said, if you don't think that sin is fun, you clearly haven't been doing it right. So, there's a lot of people who would like to say, who like to tell you, if you're just doing everything the right and moral way, that's so much better and so more, truly enjoyable and that's where you kind of sit back and say, maybe that's true, or maybe you've never done cocaine off a swimsuit model's breasts. There are different things appeal to different people. We have different appetites, different goals, different temptations. And so I would be cautious about making claims that, while they may well be true for you, are not necessarily universal. So, I'm not talking about my past. I'm just speaking hypothetically here. Let's see. Pretty cool that Alex Jones plugged unauthorized TV for you guys. Yeah, it is. I've always gotten along very well with Alex. Owen told me not to listen to anything Alex says because he's again, I'm not interested in getting involved in internet drama. Obviously, I have very high regard for Owen. I don't personally have any problem with Alex. I actually get along very well with most people that actually take the time to talk to me. I would probably get along just fine with, say, Jordan Peterson, for example. I got along just fine with Sam Harris, but I'm also a bit more intellectually inclined than the average talking head, as it were. And so, it's there's not a lot of heat in my relationships, in my public relationships, and so there's no need to get involved in those things. Yeah, and I think that you do need to keep in mind that Alex is under a tremendous amount of pressure. We don't always handle those things well. The Rational Rise says, ever thought of developing a self-knowledge tool like Peterson's online Big Five quiz for the SSH? Could be a helpful way to give people like me who have A, B, G, and Sigma traits to get a clear view. I actually quit my blog that dealt with those topics. I actually just let Alpha Game go fallow because I am so aggressively uninterested in helping people better understand what they are. There is nothing that I like discussing less than people trying to tell me that they are a gamma or an alpha or a sigma or whatever. I have literally no interest in it. I will write a book on it at some point in time. If it's useful to people for whatever reason, great. But, if you want to know what you are, go ask someone else. They'll tell you. What you're really trying to do with these things is come up with a way to increase your perception of your own status. You're trying to elevate yourself to a status beyond where you actually are. That's normally what people do. That's fine. It's normal human behavior. I'm not criticizing it. I'm just saying that recognize that's what you're trying to do. Odds are very good that if you talk to a friend of yours who is familiar with the social sexual hierarchy, he can nail you instantly. We're always better about being being brutally accurate with others than with ourselves. Turlex says, or stolen a telephone pole. Yeah, I got to plead the fifth on that. So, I don't understand why Vox doesn't address the Jewish question, because I'm not an obsessive who is at all interested in catering to monomaniacs. Cave Bear says, have you trained your mind in stoicism to temper your thoughts and emotions? You have a very even keel. I would hesitate to say that I've trained my mind, but I certainly read a number of the Stoics at a relatively early age. It definitely appealed to me, and I have definitely consciously tended to embrace that way of looking at things. Now, some of it is natural. Anyone who is inclined to the intellectual and the abstract is going to naturally tend to drift off and not be terribly involved in much easier than if you tend to be a hot-tempered, passionate individual. neo-clown means. You know, all you guys are focused on doing is trying to get people to parrot you. That will never happen. That will never, ever happen. I'm much smarter than you are. I have a much deeper understanding of what's going on than you do. And I'm not going to sit around and say the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. You know why? Because no one listens to you when you do that. Because you're boring. You know? I have no problem whatsoever saying we should not go to war with Iran. There is no American national interest in going to war with Iran. I don't even believe that Israel should have an interest in going to war with Iran or in having America go to war with Iran. And the fact that there are people like Ben Shapiro, like Dennis Prager, like Bill Kristol, you know, like the authors of the Project for the New American Century, the fact that those neo-clowns are all trying to force President Trump to go to war with Iran is totally and utterly insane. You know, I don't understand why John Bolton is anywhere near a position of influence. But to say that I don't address it or something is just flat out false. Linjin says, you're very critical of ethnic Germans. I am? I've never really thought of myself that way. Is there some psychological sickness in the German identity? Well, there is now. You know, their obsession with the Holocaust, their desperate attempts to try to somehow redeem themselves for the actions of their grandfathers and great-grandfathers. I mean, that is a sickness, you know. Either we believe in collective racial responsibility or we don't. And officially, according to, you know, mainstream philosophy and thinking, we don't. So, you know, it doesn't make any sense. Can you recommend a Stoic to read? Absolutely. Start with the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius. What's your thoughts on Project Veritas and the leaks they've been releasing? Are they legit? Yes, they are legit. And Wasper says, Vox, my mother is a boomer and she enjoys listening to your Darkstream. Yeah, I don't, when I'm criticizing boomers, when you're criticizing an entire generation, you're not talking about every person in that generation. You know, that should be relatively obvious, I would think. Okay, Boss Theory, you need to relax. I always check to make sure I got the super chats. He says, you ignored my super chat. I know it was off top. You don't have to be on topic for a super chat. I haven't gone to check them yet, which I'm going to do right now. Cave Bear says, I bet you live rent-free in Peterson's head. It does appear that way, especially after that Milo interview. Oh, Boss Theory, I already addressed your question. The one where you said, you won't argue on my channel, build my own studio. Why do people feel the need to argue in your house? I addressed that. So I don't know if it froze and you missed it or something, but I definitely addressed it. The point is that people tend to forget that there's hundreds of people here. They just tend to look at it more as some sort of interactive TV that only they are related to. What is the pathology plaguing Democrats? They've learned nothing from 2016 and continue to grow even more unhinged. The pathology is diversity. They genuinely believe it's a strength. So, all right, well, we've run a bit over, but thanks for tuning in tonight. Let me see if I can get the get the screen back or not. I'm going to see if I can. There we are. Okay. Yes, we can. What do you know? So, well, thanks for tuning in. This is the Darkstream. I'm Vox Day.